Hi, welcome to AI in Action. My name is Mari, and I'm here with my husband, Jim, and we are here to talk about artificial intelligence. Of course, we have a guest this evening. David, would you take just a couple of seconds to introduce yourself and tell us just a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm David Hirschfeld. I'm founder and CEO of my company, Tekyz, spelled Tekyz. We do custom software development for startups and scale-ups primarily, and pretty much and I've been in the software industry for 35 years, both the startup side as well as early in my career was all enterprise.
Awesome. Yes, having a company of your own, that's a lot of work, right? We know that. We've done that. I think we were serial entrepreneurs for quite some time, like owned a restaurant. It's like that's one thing
Mhm.
that you should never do is buy a
Nope,
restaurant. Yeah, it's
nope.
that
I
that
love
that is
going to
definitely
them. That's as close as I'll ever get to the back of
yeah, that
administration. Yeah,
oh man, that's a lot of work. So you have a thing called Launch First. Would you tell us
Mhm.
just a little bit about Launch First and the methodology that you're talking about and like its
Sure.
evolution over time?
Sure. Yeah. Launch First is a way for startup founders who have an idea in software, SaaS, B2B is really ideal for it, but it's not limited to that, to be able to take their idea and turn it into revenue as a way of proving product market fit through pre-launch sales before building their product. And the genesis of that is I've had my own startup, a successful one that I exited in 2000, and then one that failed in 2006. And so I've seen both sides just from my own perspective. And when I started Techies, since in 2007, I have since worked with well over 90 founders and startups. A few of them really successful, but the vast majority of them failed. And they all fail for the same reason, is they wait way too long to validate that they have product market fit. And the reason they do that is because the only way to validate product market fit is by selling your product to customers, and they'll pay you to buy it in enough numbers that your lifetime value of that customer versus the cost to acquire each customer, that you've got at least a 3-to-1 ratio there. And the problem is that people have to go out and ask their customers to buy something that doesn't yet exist to do it. And we've developed a methodology to do that.
Oh, wow. That's very interesting. Jim, do you have anything to add to that?
Now,
It's
I've been in the software development hardware. I used to be a hardware engineer as well. I actually work for a school district now, but I've done
Mhm.
a lot of hardware and software, and I've been in companies like you that successed and failed. I'm interested in this idea of a pre-selling. I mean, it almost sounds like you're pre-funding. What is the name of that website where you can pre-fund your product?
like a Kickstarter or
Yeah, like a
something like
Yeah, like
that.
Kickstarter.
Kickstarter.
Is
Yeah.
this the same kind of thing you're thinking about, or am I missing something?
Well, if you've got a product that is going to be targeted to the mass and it needs to have a mass appeal, then Kickstarter is a similar concept. But if you've got a product that you're going after a business, like a B2B type of software where you're going to have a specific niche that you're targeting, and then something like Kickstarter doesn't work because you're marketing to the general mass with something like Kickstarter, whereas you need to find a way to get, but it's the same kind of concept. You're basically saying, I've got this product, it's going to be coming out, and I want you to buy it early, and I'll give you a killer deal to do it. Plus, you get some other things along with it. And
It's like
depending
what
on the
we're doing with Agnes. We have a product,
Mhm.
Agnes, that is specifically meant for like small businesses and districts who are having a hard time
Mhm.
affording the subscription-based products
Mhm.
because you have to buy the subscription for the whole district or the whole number of employees. And
Right.
so it sounds exactly like what we're looking at doing. We're giving a huge discount
Mhm.
um, for Agnes to go into the beta version, as I call her, or
Mhm.
Jim calls her the pilot version. If you're willing to, implement her first, come in and
Right.
start putting her in first. Yeah, that sounds
Right.
exactly. So talk to me a
It's
little bit
very
about,
similar. Yeah. Yeah.
okay, you
And how,
said,
by the
yeah,
way, I'm curious how successful you've been with that, with doing pre-launch sales.
well, we just showcased her at the TCEA conference,
Mhm.
which was what, 2 weeks ago?
Mhm.
Mhm.
And so we're just now starting to talk to people to get them to put her in the school as a pilot. So
Mm-hmm.
we have not made any quote unquote sales. We've just got a lot of like statements of work that are in the pipe to see if something happens. Now in districts, a lot of times they don't do anything until at the end of the school year because the
Right.
budget cycle in districts restarts July 1st.
Right.
So
School
yeah.
districts are
Yeah.
a tough sell anyway.
They are. Yeah.
When I created the whole idea behind this, it was how do I get AI into school districts at an affordable price?
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to give access to the best that you can get, but I wanted to do it in a way that I could afford it. And we're a medium to small, probably medium-sized school district, and the cost of putting it in was just high. So it's really kind of a hybrid solution. I am interested in. I mean, have you ever done anything with the launch first kind of thing where you've targeted things like public schools or things like that? Because we have a difficult time buying things that don't exist yet. I mean, there's some pretty strict rules about it. So does that mean that that's kind of off limits for the kind of thing you're talking about, or is that different?
Not necessarily. You just have to. You just have to have. They may not. They. You just have to have a way of making a contingent commitment where the commitment is contractual, so that if you meet the commitment, they pay for it, which is equivalent to basically buying it, as long as you meet whatever that minimal commitment is in terms of delivery. So they're not really buying something that doesn't exist. They're committing to buy the thing once it does exist, and you have to give them a really big value for doing that. Like you might with a school district, you might, depending on how you're charging for the actual AI portion of it, you might give them a lifetime license to your software side, where you're doing pass-through cost on the AI initially, and maybe they pay 2 years of license fee in advance for that, or 3 years, and they get it for life, along with all the upgrades, and they also get free implementation and their own support line, which you wouldn't get if for free if you weren't buying in the pre-launch model, right? If you make it attractive enough, and you've got the right stakeholders that you're communicating with, then you can sell it that way. But in a school district, you'd have to have some kind of contingency that if you don't deliver what you promised to deliver, and then you have to be very specific if it's a school district in terms of what that delivery is and what it accomplishes, right? But then you do it, and then they pay for it, and that way you got the money to go out with it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Awesome.
unfortunately, my goals tend to be more focused on the engineering side. So I tend to focus, how do I solve the problem, not how do I sell it? And so it's always been.
He was not going to sell Agnes at all. I mean, he was just solving the problem that's in our district and giving it to all of his after hours time and weekend time and all the hours he's put into it for free into our district. And I was like, that's great, but our district doesn't care if you take what they're piloting and then, package it and sell it. So I finally convinced him that it was sellable. But anyway, we're getting off track here.
Go ahead.
That's okay. This is fascinating. I mean, this is all about launch first, though. And what you said is really key to dealing with startups as well as with AI or anything else. And that is, founders that have vision and believe in their product and believe if they just stay focused on the goal, those are code words for "I'm going to fail."
Thank you, David.
Yes,
thank you. Awesome. Jim, did you hear that?
I did.
I've got that on recording. I'm going to rewind and play and rewind.
Okay.
And play.
However, founders that love the problem and want to spend all their time talking with potential customers about their problems, those are founders that consistently find a path to success, because the solution then becomes the natural mitigation of the problem, not the product to be in love with.
Yeah, I actually, because of the nature of what I do, I spend a lot of time with teachers, and I spend a lot of time, we talk to teachers, we go to conferences and stuff like that. So we actually do clearly understand what they're asking for and some of the cost and all that other stuff. But I do get a little bit too focused on solving the problem. Someone told me once, make it work, then make it elegant. And I tend to focus on how do I make this really, really integrate. I'm kind of obsessed with it, actually, because I do believe that AI for public education is important. And, I'm
Mhm.
not doing it just because I love AI. I'm doing it because I really believe in what it can do. And what I'm afraid of is that the school districts are going to end up with some very vanilla products that really, they do great things in the enterprise space, but they don't work very well in the schools because I see it all the time. Anyway, Mari, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And
Go
see,
get with your next question.
well, for
Mhm.
me, real quick, for me, it's the cost involved because when I look at rural America, rural school districts, underfunded school districts, and then I look at the private schools or the schools that have the decent funding, that it's
Mhm.
not a problem for them to pay $10,000 a month for a
Mhm.
subscription to an AI product. I see that
Right.
digital divide, that opportunity divide, just getting wider and wider and wider. So, it's why we've spun off
Yes.
a nonprofit for us to start trying to get grants and stuff to really start trying to push into these underfunded school systems. But
Mhm.
okay, next question. You said you started this in 2007. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Techies.
So,
Yeah.
so what has artificial intelligence done? What has AI done that has changed where you were going in 2007 versus where you're going now?
Well, AI wasn't something that we spent any time on in 2007.
Right.
And there wasn't, you had to be building all your own machine learning models from, and use matrix math and do it at a very core, and build your own neural networks and all that back then, which we played around a little bit with. It wasn't until 2000, I think, 14 when Google came out with TensorFlow that it started to become a consumable thing for for a typical technical team, where you could start to build your own AI models. But even then, it was pretty early, right? OpenAI, changed that. I think I read an article from in Scientific American 2019 or maybe 2020. I don't remember exactly when, a year before ChatGPT came out. And the article was written by OpenAI about OpenAI. And that was a mind blowing. I read it and I thought, wow, was written by an AI engine about itself. And so, of course, I immediately got involved at that point, going forward with AI. Instead of worrying about building our own models, I started learning about large language models because I didn't really know about them until then. Now, of course, the acceleration is just crazy in terms of the
It
speed
is.
at which
It is
things are
crazy.
evolving.
It,
I'll
it
give you, yeah. Oh, go ahead.
no, that's fine. Go ahead, David.
I was going to say I can give you some examples of how we use AI just recently, just personally, right? And it just brings to light how powerful this stuff is. So my wife and I, for my birthday and also for Valentine's Day, we decided to go to the Tucson Gem and Mineral Show. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's the largest show in the world and they have it every year. I think they've had it for 80 years or 78 years, something like that now. And it takes over the whole city. So like the convention center, Tucson Convention Center is just one location and there's like 50 locations where this show is all over the city. It just takes it up. And they have everything from tiny little minerals and rocks and precious and semi-precious stones and precious stones to these gigantic crystals that are, and everything in between. It's that. So we went because this stuff to us is just fascinating. And these like geodes that are like 8 feet tall and
Sounds like I need to
that have,
go. That sounds
Yeah.
like my
it's
kind of place.
massive.
Sounds like my
I
kind of
cannot
place.
over I cannot overstate how big this thing is. So anyway, so I knew that. We used to live in Arizona. We never went when we lived in Phoenix, but now we live in San Diego. We decided to finally go. And we went for 4 days, which is not enough time. Um, uh, and but we needed to plan the trip because it's in so many locations scattered all around the city, and there are different areas center on different things. So I had just the new version of ChatGPT with the deep reasoning and O3 the O3 Mini High
Mm-hmm.
came
Mm-hmm.
out, right? And so I thought, okay, I'm going to go ahead and get the pro version, which is a bit expensive, but we had other reasons we needed it in Tekyz. So I got the pro version, and I had it. I gave it all this descriptive information about who we are and the kind of stuff that we like and what we were looking for. We had an objective for our entryway in our home that we're going to find some large crystal thing for that, right? And then and what our age was and our age. Anyway, so it spent about 10 minutes doing its research, right? And it researched, I think, close to 30 different sites that it found to research this, and came back with an entire agenda for the show, for every day of the show. And it was just one query I did. It came back with some questions first, and then I answered the questions, and it came back with that agenda. But it was really phenomenal how much information it did. It gave us. It organized a trip in terms of things that were proximate on each day, and that it went through kind of an evolutionary. You want to start here, but you're going to want to end 3 or 4 days later over here, or 3 days later, and then circle back to make your deals the last day. And it even gave us negotiating tips and how some of these dealers work. I was really, and where to eat, okay, now you need a break for lunch, and here's a few nice places based on your eating style. That was amazing.
So
I haven't tried that one.
the show has already happened. I mean,
Yeah, the show happened.
So you
And
went to the show and you followed the itinerary?
We did. We followed
That's
it.
awesome.
Actually, midway through, we decided instead of looking for a really big amethyst geode, we wanted to find agates. We fell in love with these big agate slices, because we can mount them on the wall right when you walk in the house and backlight them. They'd be really spectacular. So we changed it, and then I put that in, and it came back and said, okay, let me update your itinerary. And it redid the itinerary based on that. Right?
That's awesome.
It was amazing.
I haven't tried that yet. We have the pro version like you do. We just got it recently, and I've used deep research a little bit, but I haven't used it to plan an itinerary. That's an interesting use. I'll have to try that.
Jim, you want to use it for more technical things, probably.
I tend to, but it sounds like a cool thing to use. I would like to try the itinerary thing, because we're about to go to San Diego pretty soon.
We're headed to San Diego first week of April. Yeah, we're headed out to San Diego.
You gotta look me up. Yeah, you gotta look me up when you come out here.
We are going to the ASU GSV summits. I think it is. It's a big educational, and it's a summit there in San Diego that we got an innovator award for Agnes. And so we're speaking for like 40 minutes on the floor about what she does and all that good stuff. So, all right. So when you go to businesses and you say, hey, we're going to do this for you, how receptive are you finding them to artificial intelligence? I mean, is it changing the paradigm of how you're selling your products? Is it helping? Is it hurting? What's the reception?
So we do custom software development for a lot of startups. Most of our customers come in from referrals. And at this point, most of these companies are trying to implement AI in some way in their startup products. So I'm not running into that so much. However, some of my customers are building AI products for industries that are older industries, right? Like product distribution, resale and distribution industries, which have ERP systems. So they're doing all these POs and invoicing and maybe drop ship from other vendors. Right now, there's a project we're involved with, and they have people who have to reconcile the discrepancies between the order from a customer, and then they send out the purchase order to their vendors, and then it's missing shipping, or they send back the wrong number of products and things like that. And it's all manually done right now. And they get their orders from attached PDF in emails. So we're building an AI model that automates this workflow for them, and takes the PDF, turns it into data, checks that against their ERP system, and then identifies if there's a potential conflict. And if there is any kind of conflict, then it'll resolve it if it can, if it knows how to resolve that conflict. And if not, then it'll flag that and then notify the person who does this conflict resolution, who can then bring it up on a screen and see what the order that they got was, what the invoice or the PO sent, or the products being shipped back, or the invoice, whatever the thing is, and it'll be flagged wherever there's a discrepancy, so that they can then make the change real quick. and
So
then the
it's
system
just
will then
flagging.
learn.
It's flagging the issues, and then the human is putting the eyes on it to verify that the issue exists and deciding how to change or reconcile the problem.
And then we add that, and then we teach the AI, this is how this is resolved. And then it learns
So
and it
it's
knows, and
learning
it,
it.
right. The goal is to get to like 95% of these discrepancies automatically handled. And then they're instead, and so they can scale up their business and not have to add another person who, right. And plus all that tribal knowledge, that person knows how to reconcile these things now becomes part of their intellectual property because the AI knows how to do it.
Cool.
Do you focus on the cloud-based frontier type models like OpenAI APIs kind of thing, or are you doing anything locally with your own running your own models on their own servers kind of thing?
Well, we're not running models on our own server. We were doing more RAG models, which is kind of like what you're talking about.
Yep.
But less and less because we're able to accomplish a lot of what the RAG models were required to do using training and embedding and other things that are just becoming more and more powerful with each of these builds. So we still have to do some training because, like in healthcare, for example, the models have to be very specific. But a lot of that infrastructure now is starting to become available, like with Gemini. With some of these tools that give you all this work, this infrastructure to create very vertical intelligence in and limited variation in terms of how you want responses to be. You don't want to ask a healthcare question, all of a sudden it's creating a recipe for you, right?
Yeah.
So you want it to respond to the healthcare and limit what it can and can't talk about, and it's just getting easier and easier to build those models.
So speaking of healthcare, how are you addressing some of the ethical considerations and the training paradigm on, okay, this is an AI, it might go to, a cloud-based service. How are you addressing those ethical
Privacy.
considerations? Privacy, data
Yes.
privacy, all those buzzwords that you hear out there, they're everywhere.
Yeah. So and that's really a great question because I remember 10 years ago, which is not that far back, right? Where everybody was afraid of having data in the cloud and they had their own servers and hard drives and everything like that. Now you feel kind of like, why am I storing this on my own hard drive where I could have a fire and then I lose all that data? And I know that if I put it in the cloud, I don't have to worry about those data centers dying. And if you look at the security in these clouds, like Google, they've never been hacked. Google's, with everything going on where most people's PCs and WordPress and application servers have been hacked at some point, right? And you're having to constantly monitor and build protections around it. But if you're up in one of the big clouds, then you're about as secure as you can be, assuming that you haven't done anything to make that data available in in non-compliant ways. So, for example, if you're in healthcare, hopefully you're in a high trust cloud, and your operation runs HIPAA compliant. If you're in law enforcement, hopefully you're in your SOC 2 level 2 certified compliance, and that which means that you get audited by a third party auditor to make sure that you're following all these compliance things, right? But your operations should run in the cloud, in a government cloud, or in some cloud that has all the compliance already in place. So I don't think maybe in education, I'm not sure, because that's not an area where although my wife was a teacher, I've stayed away from education just because of the problems that you were talking about earlier from a business perspective. Trying to build things that I would market to education, although I know they desperately need it. But also part of the problem in education is then districts can change, and all of a sudden what they were following a certain direction, all of a sudden that direction just gets pulled out from underneath you and goes a different way that you may not agree with. And so where in business that can happen too, but not so much. It's usually there's a value proposition that you can always focus on.
Right.
But when it comes to cloud and security and things like that, I think most people assume that cloud is more secure than any other way to store your data. And as long as you're following certain compliance things, like in healthcare, then you won't have data privacy issues. For example, if I'm building a healthcare product built around Google Gemini automation, I know that I can build a private functionality in terms of my AI and have all the training done in a way that's private, and I don't have to worry about somebody that information getting leaked out to China, because I'm not using DeepSeek or something that I can't be sure is going to maintain the kind of level of compliance and security that it requires.
Do you have trouble with managing costs? I mean, AI, especially when you start talking about agentic AI, where it can kind of go off on its own a little bit. I remember the first agent that I built early on. I built a RAG model like you were talking about, and that's the first HR onboarding tool that I put at the school. But I did experiment with this agentic style where I could, it could make its own decisions. And I also found it running up, token bills in a really big hurry. So
Yeah.
if you're all cloud-based, do you have some kind of piece in place that manages that component? Or is that something you self-developed, or are you using something that's provided by the cloud? Because they don't tend to want to provide that.
No. Well, when you're talking about agentic workflows, the problem is that they just kind of run off.
Yes.
Right. They lose context and they go off and to spin all over the place.
Yep.
They're getting better. They are ways off. In fact, we work a lot with this because we're trying to even automate internal processes for developing code. Building a function or module, it's like really brilliant now, right? Building parts of an application or creating the initial scaffolding, it's pretty good with that, depending on the products you're using. Building the UI now has gotten to be really good with products like Vercel.
Mm-hmm.
But we want to generate microservices and build sophisticated functionality and data management, and it gets off track pretty darn fast when we do that. Because even when we're using the latest stuff that's built into like Cursor code editor, where it understands all your code, the context window is still not quite big enough, and it loses context when you ask it to make a change that it's in some part of the application. It doesn't realize there's other downstream effects, and it doesn't have enough agentic contextual understanding to know that it needs to step back and analyst look at all the downstream effects in every other place that needs to be touched if you're going to make this change, and then put the plan together for this is how we're going to implement it, and then do all the code changes in the different areas. We're actually working on something to try to accomplish that right now, so that we can, because we believe we can get to 80 to 90% reduction in what it takes to build something now versus what it took us a year ago. Right now, we're at about 30% because of this problem that we're trying to deal with. So, and that's the problem, is the runaway, right? And makes mistakes, and then it tries to fix it 50 times.
Oh yeah, I'm quite familiar with that. I discovered a problem recently I was using Claude at the time, but I had built a project plan which I had fed into Claude, and then I asked it to build me a checklist to go through on the project plan. Well, what I didn't realize, because I didn't check it close enough, is that it left out some very key steps in that project plan. And when I implemented the project plan, and then I went, oh, that's not going to work at all. And it only left out 2 parts, but they were very, very key components. So,
yeah, right.
Anyway,
yeah, that's something that I'm seeing. You hear people that are like, "Oh, well, we're not going to need." I mean, you do software development. That's what you do. You develop software for businesses, and you see all these articles about how AI is going to replace your coders, and you're not going to have entry-level coding anymore, and all this stuff. But I hear Jim all the time talking about, well, if I didn't know something already about coding or this language that I'm writing this in, then I would not have caught that. So, do you see that AI is going to influence all of the software development stuff and the methodologies that we're using, in the future? Or are we still going to have traditional, you better know how to do this, because if not, you're going to fail drastically with this code that you're putting out there?
You need to know, is this application architected well? Is the database designed properly, right? You need somebody with those sets of skills. but it's going to give people the ability to be 10 times as productive, right? Because they'll be able to, but we're going to need to build 10 times as much, because look at all the opportunity it's creating. I don't really see it reducing, it's going to reduce the number of people being hired in corporations to do all the general programming, but they're going to find so many opportunities for all these new avenues to generate revenue that it's going to create a whole new batch of developers that have, you still need those skills. I don't see that going away. Not in the near, and not anytime soon. I see this shift, a big shifting in the kind of skill sets you're going to need, but I don't see that the technical skills go away. I mean, it's just like we used to, it used to be machine level language, right? That skill's not gone, right? And there's, but it's much more abstracted. It takes much less effort to build lots of code that would manipulate all the machine language, right? But we have a much larger number of developers required to satisfy business and technology. So I don't know if it's going to do that, if it's going to make more, bigger opportunity. I don't see it reducing the number of technical people needed. You may see a dip at times, like we always do, and then it's going to go back up in a different way, but you'll need those technical skills.
Well, before, I know Mari's about to say we're running out of time, but before we do, just so happens Mari and I are actually meeting with 3 classes of pre-engineering students tomorrow at our high school to talk about AI. So if you were in front of those 3 classes tomorrow to talk to these pre-engineering students, what would you tell them?
What would I tell them? I would tell them, these I assume are high school kids that are really interested. And
we hope so. They're pre-engineering students, so we hope they're interested, but you never know.
They're taking a special class.
They are taking a class
titled
on it.
Pre-engineering. So I'm hoping.
And it's an elective, right?
Yes.
And it's an elective? Okay. So that's an important question before I answer it. So the first thing I would say is, look, learn how to do things yourself, right? Without, and AI, you can use AI to help you construct stuff. I think it helps teach you how to be a better coder, right? It helps you, and it helps you learn certain coding languages a lot faster that you might take a lot longer. Take some very basic stuff though, because if you don't learn really a lot of the basics, then as you get into more complex stuff, you just get lost and you don't know if it's doing what you want it to do or not in a smart way. Like, how do you design a database? If you don't, a relational database or a document database, if you don't learn the basic tenets of why you would want a relational database designed in third normal form, and when you wouldn't want that, when you need to denormalize that database. I mean, these are all technical terms, but if you don't learn those things, then you can't guide AI along into creating these structures properly later on, and you won't know why your system is cratering when you start to get some load in a certain way and how to fix it. So, or how to guide AI to fix it, right? Or if you ask AI to fix it and it comes back with, this is what I suggest, how do you know, does that make sense or not? So I think you need to learn all this stuff, but I think you need to develop critical thinking skills and communication skills. It's way more important that you know how to articulate to AI what your context is and what role you want it to play and what output you're looking for. And if you can do that, you get a lot more out, and say please and thank you.
Please and thank you. So important. Important.
I've started doing it. I'm
glad. Our daughter always told him, she was like, Dad, when the AI comes, it's coming for you first.
Because I wasn't polite.
Not being very nice.
I wasn't being polite. So
anyway, David, thank you for saying that.
For you.
That's what my daughter told me that. My daughter told me that. Can you believe it?
If you just do a few tests with it where you say please and thank you, and you don't do that, you find you're getting better results from it.
I did find that.
6%. Yeah. I think there's been a study, 6% better answers if you're polite. David, thank you for saying that you have to, do the critical thinking and the communication, because one of the things that we hear a lot in education is, from English teachers and social studies teachers is that the kids are going to be really lazy and they're going to use the AI to do all their work and they're going to lose all their skills and they're like fearful of their job. And we're like, no, in the future, being able to communicate is going to be so much more important because you're going to have to be able to draw those boxes for the AI to work within that box. You're going to have to really be very specific about what you're telling it. So communication skills are very important.
It's a trade-off. There's certain skills they just won't need as much anymore. And there's other skills that they will need that they never needed before. I liken this to typing versus learning how to handwrite neatly, right? So my wife was a fourth grade teacher for 20 years. And in the same classroom the whole time, which was like a 10-minute walk from our house, it just worked out. And she loved it. She retired just 2 years ago. She stopped in the last few years, recognized last maybe 6 or 7 years, said there's, and she has great handwriting and she loves to write with pen and paper. She said, there's no reason to teach that anymore. Other than they can recognize it when they see it, but there's no reason for them to be really good at cursive anymore. They need to be really good at typing.
It's interesting because our son, our youngest son, actually treats writing in cursive like an artist. He thinks it's artistic. So he learned it because he just likes doing it, which is an interesting perspective. And I think it's a valid one because not everybody learns to paint. Some people love it, some people don't. But you can treat those. The skills don't die just because you don't teach them every single to fourth grader. They just become more specialized. So,
I think
and your son will be thought of as the modern day Renaissance man because he can write cursive.
Yeah,
exactly.
He does calligraphy.
He does calligraphy as well.
I think the problem that you're going to run into is that, like, there's been studies now that are coming out about how if you don't learn how to write, you don't learn how to do cursive, then you're not making some brain connection, some neural net connection, and your learning's going to go up and yada, yada, yada. And I agree with all this stuff, but I think the problem that we're going to have is that you can only fit so much information in the time that we have to teach it. And so it's like eventually you're going to have to let some things drop off, like how to read an analog clock, might have to drop off so that you then have.
So funny, the analog clock thing, because I remember that my wife was telling me some kids came into her classroom and they had no idea how to tell time looking at an analog clock because they've always had digital clocks.
Right. And it's like, I was in the classroom for a long time. And if you tell me I have to teach 175 skills and you give me 2 days to do it, I can't, and so eventually something's going to have to drop off. Speaking of dropping off, we are out of time. David, real quick, give us, like, if you wanted to tell somebody where to find you, how to find your company, what do you want to tell them? Where do they need to go find you?
Okay, you can find me at Tekyz.com. Tekyz is spelled Tekyz. So Tekyz.com. And anybody that made it to the end of this, don't put this link in there. But my email is david@tekyz.com.
So that's hard to remember. That's hard to remember.
Exactly.
Exactly.
You can look me up on LinkedIn.
Okay.
You can look up David Hirschfeld
Jim and
on
I are going to be in San Diego the first week of April. I will shoot you an email before we head down there. Maybe we can, meet for coffee or something. We'd love to continue the conversation. So, all right. Have a really great evening. And everybody out there listening, we appreciate you guys listening in. Make sure you like, subscribe, all of that good stuff that I'm supposed to say that Jim tells me I'm supposed to say. So everyone have a marvelous rest of the week. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, David.